The regular meeting of the Southern Shores Town Council for January the 7th, 2014 is now in session. Good evening. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before I take a time for a moment of silence, I want to pay tribute to a former resident who recently passed away December the 4th, as a matter of fact, this past year, Diane Henderson. Diane was a fairly long-term resident of our town, about 10 or 12 years. She was very active in our town, served on the planning board, served on our council for 4 years, instrumental in bringing about making happen, I should say, our recycling program. Also brought the town into the 20th century or 21st century, as the case may be, with our computer system. Helped develop the town website. She also was instrumental in helping to start the Outer Banks chapter of the League of Women Voters. She was very active in that. And so I just wanted to recognize her tonight as someone who contributed to our town in so many ways. Thank you. If you join me in a moment of silence, I would appreciate that. Thank you. Council, I need your approval of our agenda, or any comments you may have about it, any amendments you want to make to it.
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Same sign. Thank you. Our next item of business is to approve the minutes of the December 3rd, 2013 council meeting. You've all had a chance to look at this, I'm sure. What's your pleasure?
I move that we approve them as presented.
I second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Haskett, Town Planner, staff report.
Thank you and good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I have a brief report for you tonight for the month of December. For permitting and inspections, there were 9 zoning permits issued, 26 building permits issued, which consisted of 1 new single-family dwelling, 4 additions and alterations, 2 remodels, and 19 others. There were 73 building inspections conducted at 50 job sites. There are 13 single-family dwellings currently under construction, and the total amount of fees collected in December was $6,328.04. Also, with respect to the comprehensive bicycle and pedestrian plan, the first steering committee meeting was held on December the 12th or 20th, and the goals and target areas were identified. They will be discussed as well at future meetings, but it was a very good starting point, I think, for that committee. The next steering committee meeting will be held in February, and there will also be one of 2, or the first of 2, public workshops held in February, with the second most likely in September. And at those public workshops, anyone is welcome to attend and provide comments or ask any questions on what has been discussed so far, and to also just receive feedback from any concerned citizens. And lastly, I'll just touch on the AT&T wireless stealth tower at Triangle Park that was recently approved as a conditional use permit. The building permit application has been submitted, and we still do not have the entire or all of the documents necessary for that, but we do anticipate the issuance of that permit most likely in the next week or 2. So you'll most likely see some activity out there within the next month, I would say. Any questions?
Does AT&T have any estimate of when the tower will actually be functioning?
I do not know. No, sir. I've not been told.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Just a brief comment that I would make relative to Ben's report. I attended that bicycle and pedestrian path meeting, and it was quite interesting. Very diverse group of people and a lot of input, a lot of very interesting input as far as ideas and thoughts about not just bike safety, but pedestrian safety and automobile safety as well. Some good thoughts came out of that meeting, I thought. Thank you. Chief Cole.
Good evening. Police Department report for December, excuse me, 2013. We responded to 1,029 calls for service for December. That's actually about 195 above what we did last year in December. Just a quick breakdown of some of the things that the officers did. Conducted 263 business checks, another 285 residence checks, 10 mutual aid to other surrounding police agencies, 36 direct traffic, most of those were at the school. Suspicious conditions, we had 34 of those, and we had responded to 11 different alarm calls. Officers conducted 61 traffic stops and another 135 extra patrols. Just a breakdown of the incidents / crimes and the investigations for December. We had 23, and off to the side you can see some of the breakdowns of those. We had one which was a break-in and entering, 6 larcenies, 3 fraud, 3 damage to property, 2 drug violations. We had a ABC, an alcohol violation, missing person, and then we had a runaway. Arrests for December, we had 7, 2 for larceny. We had 2 drug violation arrests, a non-support, and then the ALE violation. That was actually an underage drinking party that we rudely interrupted. And there was about 30 underage kids that were at this party. Officers, out of those 61 traffic stops, they handed out 22 citations and another 33 warning citations. And we also had 3 ordinance violations, and we had no motor vehicle accidents for December. Questions? And the other thing I will add is that we'll be working on the annual report, and hopefully we'll have that to you within the next month and a half, 2 months for the year.
This is for my clarification, since I'm the newbie up here. Suspicious condition, what's that entail?
A lot of times what that is, it'll end up being someone from one of the realtors checking a house, but one of the neighbors just happens to see someone. Sometimes it's an unmarked van that's legitimately there, but fortunately, it's neighbors that are being aware of what's going on, and they're calling us, and we're checking it out.
This underage drinking incident, were parents anywhere around, or were they out of town?
They're always out of town. But we've had a couple since this report as well, and we can discuss that further at some other date.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one question for you. To what do you attribute the big increase in the number of police incidents, the 195 more than the previous time last year?
Hard work on the police officers.
Oh, okay. Just being more efficient.
No. Matter of fact, I looked up some of that. Some of that is we had a few more residence checks than we did last year at this time. And the suspicious conditions, we didn't have quite as many as we did last year, too. So,
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Chief. It's time for general public comment. I would, before we start with that, I'd like to remind you that if you would like to speak tonight, you need to sign up. And if you do speak, we ask you to come to the podium and introduce yourself and give us your address. And you have 3 minutes, and we'll monitor you very closely on that. I'm kidding. My apologies. Is the fire chief here tonight?
Doesn't seem.
That's why I didn't mention it. I didn't see Chief Harvey. It wasn't that I forgot it.
Sorry, sir.
Mr. Mayor, he may have gotten mixed up on the new time of
Time.
the meeting. I'm not sure, because I think he was planning on coming, but anyway. We do have a report to present on the screen for the fire
Do you
department.
want to do that?
You can, I mean, you just
Yes.
look at it.
Yes, go ahead.
Blow it up. Yeah.
You want to,
Is
so you need to read it out. You can do that.
this for the month of December? For the
It's
month
down
of
at the
December.
bottom.
This is the December report showing the major incident types, the number of incidences, and the percentage of totals on the right column that he submitted. Total of 31 incidents in the month of December.
Do you know where the fire was? I mean, it's not in town.
I do
Okay.
not know.
So it would have been a help? Okay.
Yeah.
Sam Williams?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Sam Williams. I live at 109 Pudding Pan Lane. This evening, I want to talk a little bit about the issue of takings that you will be discussing later this meeting. And I have heard a little bit about it. I don't have a strong opinion yet because I don't know much about it. So during your discussions, I would hope that you would discuss the background fully and you know, the limits and why you want to do it and some on compensation. I have some concerns. One of the major concerns is that right now, I think that we've got a decent council, and I don't expect anything to be done, you know, quickly that is something that most people don't want. But many of us remember a few councils ago when there was a big uproar about trying to get some property that the CPOA owned for dredge spoils. And so if there's another council in the future, or hopefully not, but this council in the future, that does something that has a great deal of controversy associated with it and lack of public input before a decision is made, I could be strongly opposed to you taking this tool and adding it to your toolbox. I think that the only other thing that I would like to know is what are the next steps, public hearings, input, how soon, you know, you expect to act on this, and if there's anything that you expect to use it for in the immediate future, some discussion of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Lori?
Yes, Sam and I are doing a tag team tonight. I'm Lori Williams. I also live at 109 Pudding Pan Lane. I just wanted to let folks know that Thursday night at the Kill Devil Hills Town Hall at 7 o'clock, the League of Women Voters is doing a program on flood insurance. Willow Kelly is going to be doing the presentation on some of the things that are happening with flood insurance and what may be coming up. I'm not sure if she will address the new rate increase that was just asked for. You know, she may or may not. But that is this Thursday at 7 o'clock at the KDH Town Hall, sponsored by the League of Women Voters.
Thank you, Lori. We have no old business, so we'll go immediately to new business. The Southern Shores Volunteer Fire Department Pension and Local Relief Fund appointment. I'll defer to the town manager for that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. This item in your booklet is on tab 2, and there is one seat up on the Fireman's Local Relief Fund. The fire department has recommended that the council appoint Carlos Macedo to reappoint him for another term. His term expired on December 31, 2013, so that seat is open, and he is the recommendation of the fire department. So that would be the same for staff to the council.
Thank you. I need a motion from the council to that effect.
I move that we appoint Carlos Mercado to the current expired term of 1 year.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion's made and carried. Carlos Mercado will serve until December 31st, it says expires, he'll serve until when? 1 year term from December 31st?
1 year.
So till 2014. Thank you. The next item of business is a discussion of a potential amendment to Session Law 2001-36, town manager and town attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. This matter is on the agenda based on history of last summer when we were discussing some of the portions of the dredging project. It was noticed that the town of Southern Shores did not have the same accelerated condemnation procedures as other coastal towns did in the realm of beach nourishment. We looked at that, and we did talk, that was brought to the council's attention, and there was discussion at the time about me approaching the legislative delegation for Dare County and discussing that when they went back into session. I did that over the wintertime, talking to both Representative Tyne and Senator Cook, and of course both explained to me and reiterated the process for local legislation is that both would be willing to introduce and run this bill if asked to by the town without major controversy among the board. And also as a condition of that, they would require that the board have a public meeting. So the purpose of this coming on the agenda tonight is for you to decide if you would like to direct a public meeting at our next council meeting, your next council meeting in February, to hear from the public on this and then make a decision as to whether you would like for Representative Tyne and Senator Cook to introduce this. They would need a resolution by the 1st of March in order to introduce it in May, so that is the timetable. And again, they would require a public meeting, not public hearing, but public meeting as part of your regular council meeting next month to do this. The town attorney has prepared a resolution and also the proposed amendments to the general statutes for you to consider. And again, this is not, this is just to defer to next month if you wanted to have a public meeting on this and then make your decision at that time. So I'll defer to the town attorney at this time to explain the process and what exactly is being proposed.
Ben, would you do that? You can maybe answer some of Sam's questions while you're doing that.
Sam had a number of questions that unfortunately I'm not privy to some of the answers about what you may want to do in the future. That's going to be what the council may answer that question. But I can, in my investigation, there are two issues that the town needs to deal with if it's going to do, the primary emphasis reason for this is the potential to ever in the future at some point do any sort of nourishment type project. If it ever comes to be something that the town decides to do, what often occurs is that towns that do that will need easements along the beachfront to, one, run equipment up and down the beach, and the other in the area between the mean high water line and the vegetation line where sand will be put. Typically there's an easement gained there, and that's along the beachfront. Then there are other agreements potentially that may be reached. Some towns have their own ways on and off the beach. Southern Shores, I believe, has at least one where it can get on and off the beach. If it needs more than that, it may have to reach agreements with somebody. And sometimes these easements and agreements are reached voluntarily, and if not, then that's where this process comes in. Most of the times that I've seen it, the majority of these are reached voluntarily, but in the cases that I've dealt with in other towns, there's almost always a straggler among the group who would rather not. And that's where this process comes in to potentially condemn these easements. Usually the condemnation that I've seen is not about the getting access to the beach, it's the easement along the beach. And where this resolution and request to the legislature to change the general statutes would modify the town's authorities. Currently, one, the town does not have the authority to do such condemnation, be it quickly or untimely, in a longer fashion.
Right.
So that's the modification that's proposed to General Statute 40A-3. And that would put the town in a list of just about every other coastal town. There probably are some in the southern part of the state that I'm not aware of. I don't believe Duck's on this list right now, but the list currently includes Carteret and Dare counties, the towns of Atlantic Beach, Carolina Beach, Caswell Beach, Emerald Isle, Holden Beach, Indian Beach, Kill Devil Hills, Kitty Hawk, Curie Beach, Nags Head, North Topsail, Oak Island, Ocean Isle, Pine Knoll Shore, Sunset Beach, Surf City, Topsail Beach, Wrightsville Beach, and the village of Bald Head Island. All of those towns are included in a provision that's just for those local governments under 40A-3. All of them are also included in another provision in 40A-42, which allows them to use the quick take procedure for for nourishment-related condemnations. Quick take procedure, 40A-3 lists the approved purposes that towns can take property for. And then 40A-42 splits out some of those purposes, and there are some other statutes that give some authority as well, but some of those purposes you can use quick take for. And quick take, the essential difference between a quick take condemnation and a standard condemnation is that a quick take, when you file the complaint for the lawsuit, the town becomes the owner, and then the town deals with issues about what they own and what the compensation for that is later without the issue of whether or not they own it. So they are stuck owning it to a degree. The longer condemnation procedure can take, there are three things in the statute that can come up for when they occur. One is that if the owner files so simple education on how a lawsuit works. You file a complaint, the person who's suing the plaintiff files a complaint, the other side, the adverse party files an answer. That's the pleading that matches up with the complaint. And if the answer comes back and says, we don't dispute your ability to take or the fact that you've taken, you become the owner and can get in possession at that time. If it disputes it, then it goes on for a longer period. The other way for it not to happen is that they have 120 days to file an answer. If they don't file an answer, then that's the equivalent of them answering and saying they don't disagree with the authority or the ability to take the property. And then if they do disagree, it can go as long as until the disbursement of the deposit. So when you file the complaint, part of the procedure is to deposit what the town estimates as the just compensation at that time. That deposit can be increased over time if issues come up where you determine that just compensation is greater than that. But at any point, if the defendant goes and takes that money from the clerk, then the town would become the owner and possessor of the property. Essentially, they're saying, we're gonna let you deal with that, and we're gonna deal with the just compensation issue, and we're gonna let you be the owner and not argue about that. But if there's an argument about it, they may not take that deposit till the very end of the case, and that could be multiple years, or even it could be tens of years, depending on how the litigation goes. So the difference isn't necessarily the final outcome as much as the point at which the town would own the property and would have right to possess the property. In both cases, there are notices and procedures that must be taken publicly by the council before the complaint can be filed, before any of this process can start. And there are, I know in the quick take arena, and I believe in both arenas, there's the authority during that dependency of that period for people who do not believe that the town has the authority or wants to argue about that, to file a lawsuit preemptively to stop that. And we've seen that occur in other towns. It didn't, in the particular town I'm thinking of, it did not prevail, but they do have that authority, and in that notice period, they can do that. So essentially what this does is we give you two things. The change to 48-3 would give you the authority to do that, and would also give you, and the change to 48-42 would give you the authority to use the quick take procedure to do specifically what the statute says. Pardon me for technology, having to log back into it. But it would allow you to condemn property for the purpose of engaging in or participating with other governmental entities in acquiring, constructing, reconstructing, extending, or otherwise building or improving beach or erosion control or flood or hurricane protection works, including but not limited to the acquisition of any property that may be required as a source for beach nourishment. That's section 10. And then section 11, which you would also become a part of under the resolution as it's prepared, would also allow for the condemnation for the establishment of access to the public, access for the public to public trust beaches and appurtenant parking areas. I understand that that may be of some issue, but all of the other towns incorporate both 10 and 11, and they incorporate the authority for 10 and 11 and the authority to quick take for 10 and 11. So that's what the resolution that has been prepared does. And if you have any questions, I'll attempt to answer them.
Yeah, I'm trying to get clear on something here. The town does already have in its toolbox the eminent domain, the ability to condemn properties for certain purposes or under certain circumstances.
Yes.
And you're indicating that the purpose for this is because among those circumstances or permitted condemnation proceedings, beach nourishment or access to the beach is not included.
Correct.
Okay, so that's why there's something specific to beach nourishment, drainage, beach building, whatever.
Yes.
Now, because, I've had a couple of people ask questions, so I want to be clear on this too. And under this additional legislation, which would give the town more authority when it comes to either condemning in the normal process or a quick take or expedited condemnation, it's restricted. And for this additional legislation is restricted specifically to the items that you indicated. In other words, if a future council decided, well, we need a civic center, they couldn't use this expedited or quick take procedure to obtain a property in order to build another public building.
Not unless they already can. They may already be able to do that. The statutes 48-3, which is the authority one, and 48-42, both have standard provisions, and then a special provision that applies to these certain localities that are incorporated, that are listed. And in both of them, the only thing that's different, substantially different at least, is that ability to do the erosion, the nourishment, erosion control, drainage stuff, and the public access. That's the only thing that's different, but there's still a long list of authority. And then there's also a quick take standard authority that includes some of the provisions from that list. I would have to match them up and tell you which numbers correspond to doing the civic center.
In the long run, I believe it, but
This wouldn't change whatever authority you have today regarding that. That's what I can say. I'd have to look to see if you had that authority right now. I don't. I suspect you probably do. Quick take, most of the authority is covered by quick take. There I think there are 8 or 9 numbered categories, and there's only 2 or 3 that aren't covered by the quick take procedure in the standard provisions.
Okay, I think it would be a good idea for us to have more clearly enumerated those items that could be, a quick take could be used in.
Well, I guess essentially that they can be used today though, already for those items. I mean,
Oh,
yeah, I mean,
That's-
you've got
that's
quick
important
take,
to know.
you've got quick take authority for a substantial number of different things that you have authority for condemnation for. I can, going back and forth on this thing may be a little slower than I needed to be to do it, but, you know, the list of different authorities under all the standard provisions, there are 9 of them, or, yes, there are 9 of them, and they include, you know, open and widening streets. And these are, I'm condensing some of the terms here. Enlarging or improving public enterprises, sewer systems, electric systems, things like that. Enlarging or improving parks, playgrounds, and other recreational facilities, stormwater, sewage, drainage, hospital facilities, cemeteries. 6 is improving town halls, fire stations, constructing those. So if number 6, which I'm looking at 48-3 now, if number 6 is included in the list for 48-42, then you would have the quick take authority to do that already. But this resolution wouldn't change any of that. Either you have that authority today or you don't.
so essentially what we're talking about is this legislation that we might request deals specifically with beach nourishment,
Yes.
beach building, drainage, and that type of thing.
It deals with this.
And, because I don't believe, at least the people have asked me questions, I don't believe they, nor I, understood that we already have any quick take authority at all.
You definitely have some quick take authority. And I would say the majority of those 8 things or 9 things that are listed there are probably in the quick take authority.
And I
some-
believe those would be more, actually more the items that would be of concern to others, that might inadvertently object to this.
Maybe so. That's potential. And I again backtrack to this resolution. It's just not going to change that. But I do think you certainly have some authority to quick take certain things, and the statutes spell out what those are.
But the resolution is focusing strictly on beach nourishment. It couldn't be,
It's focusing on those 2 things that I said. The building or improving beach erosion control or flood and hurricane protection works, including but not limited to the acquisition of property that may be required as a source for beach renourishment. And then the other, number 11, which is the establishing access for public to public trust beaches, which could include the along the beach as well as the to the beach and appurtenant parking areas.
now,
Thank
as
you.
I understand the quick take process, there would have to be notification to the property owner.
For both processes, there would have to be notifications and,
And
There will also have to be a public hearing, even in the quick take process?
don't know that there has to be a public hearing, but you would have to publicly adopt a resolution to move forward with the filing of the complaints. That there are definitely steps that would have to be done openly in meetings, that would make people well aware that it was coming before it came.
are those steps defined where that could be available, let's say, at our next meeting, if this is what we decide to do?
Sure. I can provide the majority of those steps for sure. Some of them are kind of like
I think that, for me anyhow, and I think people that may have some questions, they understood the step process that you have to go through. I don't know if we'll get any more comfortable, at least they understand it's just not a willy-nilly approach.
Yeah, I think you actually, looking at it, you have to, 2 things you have to do openly. One, you have to adopt a resolution directing people to send the 30-day notices. And then once that time period has passed, you then have to adopt a resolution to actually condemn. And during part of this, somebody's got to, before any of this starts, someone has got to go and do title work to determine who all the people are. And there are processes that take some time, even in the quick take arena.
Of course, this would only be implemented if there was not some type of agreement between the property owner and the town. If it
Yes.
became it would be invoked only if it became adversarial.
Essentially, yes.
I mean, if all the parties agreed, yeah, well, we're nice guys to each other,
I believe
then
the way.
there's no issue, but
I believe the way we've done it, our firm's been involved in other towns doing it, and I believe the way we've done it is that when we sent the 30-day notice, we also proposed an easement agreement that people could sign and send back. And upon doing that, then they had agreed to it. So during that time frame, they also had the ability to voluntarily agree.
how is the value determined? Because in some instances, some of the property owner here, the property they own has, you could say start at the tax base, but they have a zero tax base. So then how do you go from there?
The property, in Nags Head, they estimated all of the easements to be $50, and that's what they deposited. And they only did that for the people that didn't voluntarily give it, I believe. Many people voluntarily gave the easements along the beachfront without any payment at all, I believe. And then the ones that didn't initially do it and they filed a condemnation, they estimated $50. I believe there were 600 or 700 properties that had to have easements obtained generally. I think that's the right number. It may be lower than that. I think that there were 100 to 150 that had to have a condemnation action filed because they didn't voluntarily give an easement. And I think now we're dealing with about 20 that are left that are going to litigate and see if they can obtain a higher compensation than $50.
How will that impact, say, one group is owners to get there, but the homeowners that are up and down the beach that have beachfront homes, would they have to be participating or would be involved with this quick take somewhere along the way?
Explain, I'm not sure I understand the question.
I own a house out here on the beach and I decide I'm not going, where do I fit into that, or do I?
I'm still not sure.
Okay. The homeowner, does he have any participation in the beach nourishment process?
In the design of the project?
No, of using any of their property that may come up to the beach, or is that all public?
It's all public, it's all public.
Well, in North Carolina, the private property owner owns to the mean high water mark.
Okay.
Generally, it's considered that between the mean high water mark and the vegetation line or the toe of the dune or other lines, there is that it's available to the public for use, but that area is the area where you would be taking an easement for along the property, because that's where you're going to deposit sand typically. You're not going to take an easement for the mean high water seaward, because that's going to be state property. They're going to be glad for you to spend your money to put sand on their property. You will not have to take their property typically.
Okay.
We've talked all through this about easements. What is there in the law that says that we're just talking easements and not a whole property? I mean, does this really say in the law itself that it could be? We decide we want to take PDQ property for whatever reason?
You're allowed, for anything that you are authorized to take, you get to decide the interest and the geographic area you want to take.
So this fits in with the other law, because the other law that you were talking about earlier does allow taking of a total property, right? When I'm saying other law, the rest of it's already in place where you say we already have the ability to do that.
Yes.
Okay,
I mean, right now, towns take drainage easements. You know, you take what you need to do the project that you need, and all of these other authorities that are there, they don't limit the interest you take. They give you the authority to fully take anything you want, but the town has the authority, the ability to determine how expansive the interest it wants to take.
I was trying to get back to the point that Sam was making from the standpoint of just somebody willy-nilly deciding to come in and wanting to take property, or what have you. I just wanted to see what, because in the resolution, we talk about easements and getting easements for it, but the law itself really goes back to the rest of the existing law, which is any amount of property.
Sure.
Is that right?
That you're willing to pay for.
Yes.
That's the really driving force in many of these arguments, is what the town is willing to pay for.
Exactly.
Not $50, but at an assessed or appraised value, that's legitimately what the property's worth. That's why you might be willing to pay for a 20-foot strip for a right-of-way for a drain pipe, but you might not
Right.
want to pay for 200 feet of beachfront property
Right.
to get access to the beach to do beach nourishment.
I totally think we should have a public hearing. I really would love to get as much public input on this as we possibly can, but I really would like to see presented some of the stuff we just discussed. Maybe a copy of the existing law that already gives us the right to do an eminent domain, and some of the other things that Leo was talking about, so we have a good feel for it and know what the whole package is. Because when I went in with these 2 pages, I thought, what are we doing this now for? And why is it, what's going on? What's pushing this? Why now? Why not later? So I think if we have a whole package to present to it, that would be a lot easier for all of us.
Mayor, I'd like to respond
Sure.
about why not later, because the timeliness does affect the management role. You charge me with a project like Kitty Hawk that we have to be done in 18 months, and we don't have access to do it. As Ben said, it could take years to get access to do it. And from a management standpoint, that's why.
One of the questions that could come up, because this is one of the questions I've been asked, is Duck has beach nourishment problems, Kitty Hawk and Kildover Hills, but we don't. We see the studies and we're looking fine, so why do we need to do it now?
We don't have it now, but I can't promise you we don't have it tomorrow.
That's right, because with the storm controls and Mother Nature controls, if we don't
I can't
control
promise you
something
won't
like that.
have a narrow beach tomorrow, and that's why we're I'm just giving you the option to
Right.
provide every tool that you can to provide nourishment for your property owners.
Right,
Although I agree with what you say, that we don't seem to have a problem, but there are property owners here in Southern Shores that would argue the opposite.
do,
In
right?
particular, the owners in Pelican's Watch and a few up towards Hickory, just south of Hickory. So those properties have at times been, at least in the perception of the owners, threatened.
no question.
And they did want to know what the town was going to do and how they were going to take care of it. It turned out that nothing was needed out of the ordinary as far as beach push or whatever. But, you know, we've had some close calls.
But what I'm saying is, if we could lay all that out, then we're putting those questions to answer, to rest, before we get into the discussion.
Well, I think it'd be helpful for Ben to provide the council with what the town authority is with regards to quick take on anything currently, if you can do that.
I can provide that, you know, the easy thing to do is to provide the statutes, and they've got a list. To expand that list and
Right.
figure out exactly what every one of them means might be more expansive than you want to do, but in general, I think most of them are self-explanatory. Like I went through and condensed them, roads and things like that, and
Right.
I can tell you which one of those are allowed for quick take now. I can certainly do that by the next meeting.
A couple of questions. One, without this legislation, without this, for the town, without the ability to do this, would that limit our ability to apply for or to be eligible for any beach nourishment funds that would be forthcoming from any government entity? And if we do have this access by this legislation, it then later becomes public access, is that correct?
Well, I'm going to answer my part, and Ben can his part. Currently, the county occupancy tax money is available to towns, and there's no restriction on whether or not there's public access. Currently, I say that. That is governed by the Board of Commissioners. They decide the rules for that pot of money. The current project that's coming up in the next 20 months, There's not a requirement in there that, say, the town of Kitty Hawk have beach accesses every 250 yards or whatever. There's no state money that's being used now for nourishment, but the Federal Corps of Engineers does have a requirement for beach accesses every certain distances. That money has not been even available to Dare County since the late 1990s. So the answer, I think, would be no to the question. But as Ben explained, the project design may dictate that we have to have access for maintenance, and also whatever type of equipment or technique is used, we may have to have access. So that's the problem. We hire an engineer and they start saying, we got to get on the beach here, we got to do this, we got to do that, and we don't have access, and the owners say, no way, no way, no way, as some did, as Ben mentioned, in other towns, and then we're stuck spinning our wheels for 6 months, and the storms come. So I tried to answer my part of it. Ben, you may have elaborate on it if you may have something else.
There were multi-parts to your question.
Yeah, the other part was, say we did a quick take and that property became the town's property, but then it becomes public access, is that correct? If the town owns it, we can't restrict who uses it if it's public access.
The town can, with our town permits. Just like we have restrictions on the parking slots, the space that we have along the highway right now, the access to the beach crossovers. We have parking spaces that are limited to a town permit. You'd have that same limited access, I would imagine.
What's important, again, I'll consider these to be perpendicular and parallel access. Perpendicular access is, say, if you wanted to go from 12 across somebody's property to the beach. Parallel access is the access for someone to use the beach along the beach. A portion of a nourishment project, the portion that raises above mean high water, so from mean high water seaward, becomes public property. Essentially, it's already it's state-owned from the mean high water seaward, and it becomes public property from the mean high water seaward when the nourishment project occurs, and it's owned by the state. Then the area to the landward side of that is where your easements would apply, and the terms of the easements would dictate what the level of control or the level of authority there is. The easements can have different terms. You could make, sometimes those could be, depending on your terms, might be whether or not someone agrees to them. Sometimes lesser terms would be more agreeable, greater, it's tough to predict exactly how that would go, but most of the easements in Nags Head allowed for the authority for that 10-year period that the easements existed to be public access as well. However, the law may make it public access in any event because it's still going to be beachfront.
Thank you.
Or ocean beach.
Thank you.
Other questions? The primary reason for this discussion tonight was for us as council to determine whether we want to bring this back up next month for a public meeting. Not so much a public hearing, but a public meeting, advertised as such, so the public can come in and give us their thoughts. As I've indicated to our town attorney before, I'm probably, I'd say I'm philosophically opposed to condemnations, just because I am. And probably because I've seen municipalities do things with condemning property that were not in the best interest of the citizens, but in the best interest of the tax base, if that's the way to put it. But I think we have a responsibility to look at the best management and the opportunity we have to give us that management tool if we need it. That's why I would like to propose to our council that we would like to have a motion that we continue this at our next meeting, not just a discussion, but a public meeting. Could someone make a motion to that effect that we do carry this
I'll
on?
move that we hold a public meeting on this topic at our next monthly regular council meeting, the first meeting of the month.
I think it's February the 3rd, I believe. I'm not sure.
Okay, February the
I'll
3rd.
second the motion.
Any discussion? Any further discussion, I should say? Anything you want to add, Ben, before I?
Just,
Call the question.
just to make sure that it's clear, because I assume people will be looking, nothing about, if you pass this resolution and send it to the legislature, they don't have to vote on it and agree with you.
Right.
They can change it. They could give you the authority, even if you don't ask for it, and they could take it away or change your authority. So nothing that you do will be binding surely about it. And further on that, nothing about adopting this resolution will tie you to ever using this authority. It will still be a discretionary thing to decide on in the future whether or not you ever use it. Nothing about adopting a resolution like this one or similar to this one will tie you to being required to use this authority.
One other question I got, pending, if the council was not to, let's say, they voted 4-1, what impact will that have as it gets further up the line? As an example, 4-1 could be 3-2.
We did talk to the delegation about that. They will look at that and decide whether or not they think that's considered controversial or not. I don't think a 3-2 vote is going to pass muster with them. But if you wanted to send a 4-1 up there, you could. They're looking for a 5-0.
Okay.
That answer your question, Mayor?
Yes.
Motion on the floor, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion's made and carried. We will have a public meeting next month, February the 3rd, I think is the date. We will discuss, 4th, is it? Thanks, Karen. We will discuss this and have the public have an opportunity to voice their opinions and give us their input.
February 4th.
February the 4th, yeah, that's what's correct. Next item is item C, consideration of state mandated code changes. Am I right about that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Town planner, town attorney.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. As you all are well aware, there were some legislative changes made this past year, and in your packets, you did include some documentation from the Institute of Government that addresses some of those changes, and two of those are the reason why you have this agenda item before you tonight. One would be a wireless zoning text amendment. This would be necessary and required in order to make our zoning ordinance consistent with this recently adopted legislation. And basically, what it does, or it sets the standards regarding the expedited review of co-location and minor modification requests. So we will be in the process, or we will establish or draft a zoning text amendment that will get our language consistent with what the state recently adopted. The other is with the Board of Adjustment and quasi-judicial procedures. And that zoning text amendment, there was a draft included in your packets, and that basically makes consistent with legislation adopted in 2013 that addresses the notice of hearings, hearing decisions, the hearing process, appeals, variances. And if you did take a look at the draft, you'll also note that we have recommended language which would assign the duties of the Board of Adjustment to the Planning Board. This idea has been discussed between the town manager and I, and I've also heard it discussed at other meetings, as well as it's been popular on the NC Plan listserv. We, based on the input we saw on the listserv and some of the input we heard from some of recent meetings, we thought that we would recommend this language and to see what you all, if you wanted to move forward with it or not. The board's last official business was conducted on November the 20th, 2008. Since then, the only matters that we've had to address are appointing new members or filling vacancies and their terms. So that's one recommendation that we've put in there that was not in the the statute changes from 2013. But both of these items will require a planning board review and a public hearing. So tonight, they're before you to let us know if you want us to take these to the town planning board and have a subsequent public hearing for you all to review.
glad to answer questions, but essentially, the majority of the Board of Adjustment changes are required changes or changes that I feel are good changes to make in addition while you're updating that chapter. Your chapter on the Board of Adjustment essentially tracked Nags Head's chapter because the majority of your ordinances track Nags Head's chapter because Mr. White was the attorney at the time of the incorporation of the town, and he was the attorney for Nags Head for a long time. And it's very similar to what Nags Head's already adopted. The only thing that is of substantial difference is the designation of the planning board as the body for being the Board of Adjustment, and that's supported by statute as an authority. You can definitely do that. So if you have any questions, I'm glad to answer them on that. And with regard to the wireless provisions, the prior wireless ordinance that you had tracked certain statutes. Those statutes changed, and Wes and I are working on preparing an ordinance amendment that will address those changes.
Questions?
No.
I don't have any questions. I would like to see it go to the planning board to be discussed, but I do have some concerns and would like to see the planning board explore and discuss thoroughly this, whether we really do want to give up the Board of Adjustments. And the only reason I say that is I'm surprised and glad to hear that they didn't have anything to do for 5 years, because that means there weren't any problems associated with specific properties. But having served on the Board of Adjustments, I always liked the approach that if somebody had an appeal to a decision that's being made, they had a third group of people to look at the decision to help make the decision. So I like that, number one. And number two was getting more citizens involved in the town's government. It's just another way to keep more people involved. So I would like to see the planning board review this and give that aspect of it some very good discussion, because I'm open to comments, but it just surprised me when I saw this.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd served on.
I'm sorry,
No.
Robert. No citizen comment allowed?
No.
Sure, I'll talk to people afterwards. Thank you. I live here.
Yes, sir.
I care about this stuff.
I'd been on the Board of Adjustments. The only question I would have or concern between the planning board and the board, would there be potential conflicts of interest?
Yeah.
Well, if you're speaking in reference to appeals, the Board of Adjustment would not hear or review an appeal that the planning board made a ruling on or made a decision on. And the town attorney may want to elaborate on that, but basically the planning board is an advisory board. Their decisions, or they make a recommendation to you all. You all make the final decision, say on a quasi-judicial matter, like a conditional use permit. That decision is not appealable to the Board of Adjustment. That goes directly to Superior Court. But town attorney can probably explain that better than myself.
First of all, the Board of Adjustment statute specifically says the ordinance may designate a planning board or governing board to perform all the duties of the Board of Adjustment. And with regard to conflicts, the only three things that Board of Adjustments really ever hear are conditional use permits, variances, and appeals. And in this town, the Board of Adjustment doesn't hear conditional use permits. This board does. So the only thing that they do hear is variances and appeals, and they only hear appeals from an administrative determination. And so they're never going to hear a decision made by the planning board acting as the planning board. They may deal with the interpretation of an ordinance that the planning board dealt with in the text amendment process, but other than that, there shouldn't be any conflict issues there that aren't the standard conflict issues about people who are on that board who may have a conflict at the time.
Can I have agreement that we take this back to the planning board for their consideration?
Yes.
And report back to us at the next meeting? You tell me when it's appropriate for you to come back to this, Wes.
This most likely will be on the February planning board meeting agenda, so you will most likely have a recommendation to review in March.
In March.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Thank y'all.
Thanks.
Thank you.
The next item for consideration is a recommendation to establish a litigation committee. I am party to the claim that's been filed against the town, and this, which this deals with specifically. So I'm going to recuse myself from dealing with this at all and have Mrs. Hess take over the meeting at this point on this particular item. Thank you.
And the one thing I would say, Mr. Mayor, is that you asked for a vote to excuse you from this item because of your
Thank you.
potential conflict.
I move that we excuse the mayor from this meeting due to a possible conflict. Is it a conflict of interest or?
Yeah, it's a potential conflict of interest because it's something that may or may not potentially involve his own direct financial interest. So, no, you can step down to the seat and stay for the rest of the meeting. But what'll happen is if the vote is to excuse him, he'll sit in the audience, and the vote wouldn't be to excuse him for the remainder of the meeting, but just this agenda item, so we don't have to bring him back in. Another part of the process, but if the motion is just to excuse him for this agenda item, I think that would be appropriate.
I so move.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great.
Okay, and because Tom gave me such an easy job, I'll turn this over to the town attorney as well.
It seems to be my night. I go about
Yes.
two
Yes,
two
it
years
is.
with no report, Mr. Mayor. That's the only thing I get to state on the record. The resolution's pretty self-explanatory. As we just dealt with, it's a potential conflict because of a direct financial interest, and councils, as most bodies, have the authority to create committees. In this case, it's creating a committee of all four of you. It's essentially just excluding Mayor Bennett from the consideration of the litigation related to Sampson and anything that comes out of it. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them, but that's what the resolution would do.
He would also be excluded from any closed session meetings.
Yes, it would give, that committee would have the authority to go into closed session to deal with issues with the town attorneys.
Then all our, let's say our meetings with, if whatever happens here, would be public, and then we could move to closed session.
Yes, we would probably, if the committee needed to meet, we would probably need to notice that in addition to the regular meeting, and it's actually a committee meeting. Anytime, it's somewhat confusing for folks that read it, but anytime that there are more than two people appointed to a committee, it is subject to the Public Records Act if a quorum of that committee meets. So some people see the two and think that only two people have to meet, but what it is so we would create a four-person committee. If more than two of you, because that would be the majority, if more than two of you were to meet together to talk about it, it would be a meeting, a public meeting that we would have to have notice and keep minutes for, and could have closed sessions and other, just as if it was the council meeting.
I have only one typo change to correct. The fourth line from the bottom, it says the authority to negotiate. Just add a little word in there.
Sure.
TL. All right, would anybody like to make a motion on this particular resolution?
I'm sorry.
I move that we accept the resolution as presented with the typo correction.
Have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Can we bring the mayor back now? We don't have to vote to bring him back, do we?
No, because he was only excluded from that agenda.
Oh, teasing him. You may return.
Town manager?
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My report tonight, very short, but I just wanted to report to you, December 21, the town helped host the Festivus 5K and 10K run in town. There were approximately 250 runners, including all the children and parents. There were 3 separate runs, And a lot of money was raised for the Children's Museum, and a lot of food was donated to the Beach Food Pantry. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for being there and welcoming the crowd.
Great event, great event.
Also, happy to report to the council that your funded beach stabilization program is now underway. Our contractor is doing grass plantings and will be doing the CO plantings later, and also the fertilization later, but it is well underway, and I'll be doing some spot photographs of that next week, hopefully, if the weather warms up a little bit, and hopefully get those out and post some of those for all the town to see. Also, you may have noticed we have a new flagpole in front of the town hall complex, and the Fletcher Family Trust has helped us with funding that, and they have also pledged future appropriations from the trust to cover the cost of the flagpole. We were able to get it in the ground, and you can see that we actually located the town flag as well. So I'll be getting another one of those soon, because that one will probably fade out, but it looks, I thought, looked pretty good. Also, just to remind you that our capital improvement planning group will meet tomorrow, and we'll begin the process of looking at projects for the upcoming fiscal year, and we'll also be reviewing progress made for this past year, and I'll be updating council in the next meeting as to where we are with those for the spring bid lettings as well. Our workshop meeting for this month, January 21, just to remind the council and the public that you did set that as a meeting, and it will be at the Southern Shores Volunteer Fire Department, Tuesday, January 21st at 9 a.m., and the fire department will be hosting the council. We will have a full scheduled meeting there. But most of the new business will be conducted in dialogue between the council and the leadership of the fire department. And we'll also have a tour of the fire department and its equipment as well. So I think that I met with the chief today, and we've got an attractive agenda set for that meeting. Also, reminder, Mr. Mayor, the Finance Committee that you've appointed will meet on January 29th to review the quarterly financials. We'll start that process underway. And that's all I have. I'll be glad to answer any questions that I might have.
One question.
Yes, sir.
Update on the dredge.
Sure. We had our every other week meeting this morning with the dredging contractor. He will finish on time. He did take several days to do some equipment maintenance, and he was ahead of enough schedule to where that was fine. He is currently located, some of you probably know, in the Long Canal between Potoskeet Trail and Duck Woods. He's about halfway down on that. In the next about 10 days, they'll be moving everything over to the Spar Canal, easternmost canal. Okay, yeah, the Spindrift Canal, and using the transfer site there beside Mr. Vincent's law firm building. That'll be the last transfer site that will be used, and once he finishes that canal, they will be finished. And they will be dismantling the current barges, believe it or not, that they have, taking the motors off and the sheds off, and actually pushing those barges underneath through the culvert, which I'm going to be sure I get some photographs of that. But, with that, they should be finished comfortably ahead of February 15th. No complaints. The silk curtains will stay in place until the very end. We may move them to up the main canal, and I don't know the name, the silk curtain, but so that would prevent boats that were in the Potoskeet Trail Canal from still going out until February 15th when the final curtain was lifted. But other boats below that would be able to get out ahead of that. So that would probably be 2 weeks when the curtain is pulled up closer in. So far, other than that, everything's fine. We've been taking those dredge spoil, of course, to our site in Currituck. Very good relationship with the contractor. He actually invited several of us up yesterday to view a christening of his new tug that his employees made over Christmas. So very, very top-notch operation going on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Town Attorney?
I don't have anything. anything further to report, Mr. Mayor.
Shucks. I would just like to second what Peter said about this contractor. We've been, I think, very fortunate to have someone come in to work for our town the way this person has. Very responsible, good equipment, good people. Not often when a guy is sweeping the street wishes you a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, Mr. Bennett. Just good folks, and they've done a good job, I think, in almost in every respect from my perspective. I heard a comment from someone in the audience a few minutes ago about public comment. I would make a note of that. We do have a sign-up sheet that is normally at the door before we start the meeting, and you're always welcome, once you've signed up, to speak publicly during the time allotted. I'm sorry if someone missed that opportunity tonight. It's just, there's a time frame we have to start the meetings and so forth. Jody?
I don't have anything, thank you.
David?
Nothing.
I have nothing, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
No,
Leo?
I don't have anything tonight.
I forgot you last time, I apologize.
That's all right. I made up for it.
Yeah, you did. If that's all we have, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I second.
All in favor? Aye. Meeting's adjourned.